Hi, Shelby.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for attending our webinar. We're very excited for the conversation that's about to happen. It's also nice to see a lot of familiar faces on my screen, people who I don't usually not able to see in the same room all on the same screen. So this webinar is being hosted by Global School Leaders, which is an organization that I co-founded. And we work on improving school leadership development in the Global South. And we work with partner organizations in different countries. So we have our partner organization in Kenya is Dignitas. Our partner organization in India is Alokit. In Malaysia is Pemimpin. And in Indonesia is Inspirasi. So GSL and our four partners, we really believe in the importance of strong school leadership. And we believe this COVID crisis, school closures, have only kind of reinforced this belief for us on the importance of leadership. And one of the things that we did as a network is to survey school leaders when COVID first happened in the beginning of April to see how leaders in our four countries were responding. And what we found is that an overwhelming percentage of them, more than 70% of the school leaders that we surveyed, felt that it was really their responsibility to ensure the well-being of students in their communities. And so we really believe that school leaders should be utilized by education systems to promote student well-being. And we've seen many examples of this where leaders have gone well above and beyond what their normal responsibilities would be to support communities and families, both with basic needs as well as to continue to promote student learning. And so this conversation, we were hoping to get together a set of exemplary government officials who have experience leading ministries of education and departments in education to give us perspective on how leaders can be utilized in this time. And I think we have assembled a really fantastic panel, people who I really respect. And we're lucky to have Syahril and Fernando, who will be moderating the discussion. So Syahril is the leader of our partner organization in Malaysia, Pemimpin, and they work with more than 100 school leaders, developing school leadership training programs, but have continued to work with the leaders through COVID and supporting the leaders through the crisis. And Syahril also has worked with the Ministry of Education in Malaysia to support education reforms. So she will be kind of introducing the panel and moderating the discussion for us today. But before I hand it over to Syahril, just a note of housekeeping. One is that the webinar will be recorded. So there were many of our colleagues who we did not have space for them to attend. So this will be shared with them to watch later. And two, if I could request you all to please keep yourselves on mute. And just to have the panelists kind of unmute themselves. If people have questions, we encourage you to leave them in the chat box, and we'll be kind of actively promoting that and prompting you all to ask questions. And someone on our team will be kind of collating them and sending them to Syahril to ask the panelists. So thank you all. I'm looking forward to the conversation. Over to you, Syahril.
Thank you so much, Samir. So it's really exciting for me to be here today in the midst of so many thought leaders as we discuss school leadership and education systems in the midst of a pandemic. So I'm hoping that we'll all take home with us some key information on what we can do and the best ways for us to deal with the new normal in our education today. So we'll start with Minister George Werner. Minister Werner was the Minister of Education in Liberia during the 2014 Ebola crisis. He led bold reforms aimed at overhauling the education system to give all Liberian children access to free quality education. Mr. Werner was also selected by outgoing President Ellen John Sirleaf to lead the human development aspect of her transition team, where he played a pivotal role facilitating the first peaceful transfer of power in Liberia in more than 70 years. So Minister Werner, it's a pleasure to have you on our panel. You're here, right? Yes, I saw you in the list.
Welcome, thank you.
So, COVID in many ways is an unprecedented event, and the Ebola crisis in Liberia probably comes as close as we have seen to a similar situation. Your work in leading education in Liberia can be very informative to all of us. So looking back at your experience leading through the crisis, what do you know now that you wish you had known back then?
Thank you, and I am very happy to be here. Does everyone hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, thank you. So in the interest of time, I will attempt to be brief. I have structured my comments in the following ways. 1, before the crisis. 2, during the crisis. And 3, after the crisis. I did that to give me a conceptual framework of how I wanted to tell you the story.
Okay.
So when Ebola struck, it didn't strike the whole country at once. It started from a small part of the country, and it slowly got to the urban area. So it was the first time, I suppose, in the history of Africa that Ebola had crept to the urban area, and so they became very huge. I say that in the context of before, right? Before the crisis. I now know that we had ample warning, if we believe, to prepare. And when I was in government, when Ebola struck, I was in charge of all of government personnel. And so the first thing we did was to galvanize the entire government team, beginning with the cabinet. And a decision was made to decongest all public institutions, to close all schools in the interest of safety. So before, safety first, and use your team to achieve that. So that's the first point I would use. Once the decision was made to decongest, and then in the interests we are talking about education, we made a decision to immediately figure out how to communicate, right, as a team. So the communication at first wasn't scientific, it was political. And we realized with time, we needed to separate the science from the politics. But it's key to have factual communication, to give that to the teachers and students who are being sent home, so that they become good messengers, so to speak, to carry information to the communities. The second thing on the during is to ensure that there is continuity in terms of measurable learning. And you leverage distant learning systems. In our own case, we use radio. At the time, we didn't have the use of technology. The use of technology came after we came up with a public-private partnership in education. So to leverage distance learning systems to really figure out what is appropriate and to figure out a way of measuring it. The second thing during this is to use cross-sectoral approaches. Education worked hand in hand with health, with women, gender and social protection, and the Ministry of Finance during the crisis. So in this case, as leaders, to leverage whatever is cross-sectorial, whether different principles across the same school system, to use that collaborative method. And that this thing also is to plan rigorously. You plan, even if you're going to collaborate with others, in terms of accountability during the crisis, who is responsible for what, and to realize in this instant that this is no business as usual. And so that brings me to my last point under this question, which is you ought to think as a leader in terms of what happens when the shadow of COVID-19 begins to fade. Number one is that we need to take school health more seriously than we ever have before. And it has to be part of our strategic planning. We have to think and plan for the safe reopening of schools. And that means that you have to train your teachers in terms of psychosocial support to students and communities. You also have to disinfect all of your schools to give parents the confidence to send back your students. And also you have to communicate again. In my own case, lastly, I took a tour of all of the schools. I took a notebook and a pen, and I just acted as a listener to parents and to students in terms of what they wanted to see in the wake of Ebola. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Werner. So if I can quickly summarize, before the crisis is safety first, and then during the crisis is to figure out communications, very important, to have structured communications, continuity in learning in terms of like what you did in the example was to go on the radio, and then cross-sectoral approaches. I think this leads us on very nicely to our next panelist, Dr. Sara Ruto. Dr. Ruto is the chairperson of the Kenyan Institute for Curriculum Development, the government body that leads development and training for basic and tertiary education curriculum. Dr. Ruto also serves as the CEO of the People's Action Learning Network. And in this capacity, she has brought innovations such as the UWIZO citizen-led learning assessment and teaching at the right level to East Africa. Dr. Ruto, thank you so much for joining us. Are you here? Let me quickly. Sorry, Samir, is Dr. Okay, so she's not on the call yet. So we'll move on to Dr. Praveen. Dr. Praveen Kumar is the Secretary of the Telangana Social Welfare Residential Educational Institution Society. an inspiring network of residential government schools for some of the most marginalized children in India. His network was nominated to be a case study at the Harvard Graduate School of Education. The Telangana Social Welfare Residential School hit the national headlines 5 years ago when one of its students became the youngest girl in the world to scale Mount Everest. Dr. Kumar, it's an honor to have you here. So we know that your network is investing heavily in school leadership even before the COVID crisis. How do you think those investments have helped your network and its students during this time? And are there areas that you wish you could have focused on with your leaders that would have been useful right now?
Thank you, Syahril, and then thank you, Samir, for inviting me to this prestigious conversation, and very critical and very important during this time. Telangana is the youngest state in India. We have 29 states, and then we are the youngest state with a population of 3.5 crores. So ours is a very unique institution which caters to about 200, more than 210,000 students, starting from 5th grade to college. And we are more girl-centric than the boys, and then about 66% of our student population is girls. And then the beauty of these institutions is all of them are residential schools. So the idea behind starting this experiment is because there are so many poorest of the poor communities and marginalized communities in the country, which are still yet to be reached. So government thought it is better to target the intervention in a more focused manner with better outcomes in view. So that's how government started the network of huge institutions. Like we have about 1,000 residential institutions in which a medium of instruction is English, and then students do not have to pay anything, and then they can join at 5th grade, and then they can leave after the college. So parents, they for 220 days they stay with us, and the remaining 145 days they stay with the parents. So that is how these institutions run. As you rightly pointed out, Syahril, for the last 5 years, we have been heavily investing in building the capacities of our school leaders. As I said, I'm taking care of 450 schools out of 1,000 schools. So these school leaders, the moment they join as school leader, they are promoted or they join as school leaders. So we have an induction program. After that, we partner with organizations like the Indian School Leadership Network, and then we have a lot of other organizations and we have our own training wings. So we have been focusing more on improving the capacities of the school leaders. And what are the things that we have achieved by doing that? Our school leaders have become very independent. They started earlier. What used to happen was they always used to look at the headquarters for the direction, because in government organizations, headquarters play a very important role. So they always used to look at the headquarters for a lot of directions. But our training on school leaders made them very independent. Then second thing is they started promoting a lot of creative projects at their own level. Then third is the most important thing, which is helping us in this pandemic times, is investing equally on the students. The school leaders are generally expected to invest on the teachers and build their capacities on a continuous basis. We call it as continuous professional development in the education parlance. But what our school leaders did with the help of these training institutions is, they equally built up the capacities of the students so that they can organize the learning environments on their own under the supervision of all the teachers. So that is one great thing that happened in our organizations with the help of school leaders. Then school leaders were also trained to meet the emergencies. So without looking at the headquarters, student leaders have been trained to be very resourceful, and the contact with the school leaders. Contact of the school leaders with the community has not been that great. There is always a tension between the community and the school administration. So we try to reduce the gap between the school leaders and the community in these in these areas. And then another important thing is health. As Minister Werner just pointed out, the health is very important. Fortunately, our system, the health is an inbuilt a component of our residential school system. Every school has one wellness center in which one qualified health supervisor is there, and then we have a command center which monitors the health of 300,000 students on 24/7 into 365 basis. So whatever that happens in the school with a student, everything it is reported both at locally as well as at the central headquarters, so wherein we focus on the health of every student. The school leader was trained to look into the health aspects of the students as well. So this is what we train our school leaders, and reasonably we have been successful on that. Now your second question is how differently, like what are the things I could have done much better in view of this pandemic time. So my answer to this question is probably in retrospect, I feel I could have invested more on technology. So making my school leaders more conversant with the technology, more conversant with the unforeseen situations. This is one of such situations which we have not seen in our lifetimes. Like pandemic, we never expected that a pandemic would strike us, and then where we had to leave all the schools and send the children back to their homes. Then third thing is reducing the anxiety levels of the students and the parents, and making the parents understand the importance of learning, making the parents about their own contribution to the learning at village level or at the community level or habitation level is something which in retrospect, of course, the hindsight is always 20/20. It's very easy to say that I could have done this, I could have done that. But in retrospect, I feel I could have done much. I could have trained my school leaders as to how to train all their parents and the other well-wishers of the community to manage learning, at least to contribute to learning partially, if not fully, partially to the entire process is something which I thought I should mention. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think like the two things that you said was on tech, and also reducing the anxiety level among school leaders, and of course parent involvement. Parent involvement is something that schools often discuss on how to get parents more involved. So now I think we can bring it back to Dr. Sara Ruto. Dr. Sara, are you on? I was told that you're here.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
Sorry.
okay.
Yes, I am here. Sorry, I was in a different room.
I heard. So I've already read your bio and your introduction, so I'm just going to go straight to the question. Thank you so much for joining us here today. So teachers and even parents in some cases, in most cases actually, are being asked to deliver and support the implementation of curriculum remotely. I think nearly half of our participants today wanted to know the answer to this. How do we support students and families who have limited access to online tools? And in your experience, how have you seen school leaders be able to best support quality curriculum development in this low resource setting?
So one of the things we have been able to do, which is encouraged when you have an emergency like this, is to do a very rapid survey, just to understand some of the questions that you are asking. And in this particular rapid survey, which I'd like to make reference to, we were asking if people are doing anything they call an innovation to support learning during this particular time. And we had responses from about 2,600 people. Obviously, these are people who needed to have at least an Android phone, so there are certain limitations. But even then, what the evidence was that at least 86% of the people are doing something, and there are about 55% new innovations that have come up during this particular time to respond to the learning needs. And that's the first thing that I'd like to stress, that we are seeing a level of citizen agency. Many of these innovations are by individuals in their own rights. And then, of course, by institutions, by organizations. Some of them are for profit, but many have waived their profit or reduced their profit so as they are doing public good. And so this agency we are seeing cuts across whether it's a school leader or not a school leader, and something that I think we need to celebrate and to crowd so small, because these are people who have very contextual things. But still, our country is a nation of nations. There are many who are able to continue with digital learning. There were many who are excluded. So specifically for these excluded communities, what are people doing? And we have seen solutions where you have individuals who are repackaging the TV and radio lessons so that they are acting as a conduit to reach homes that do not have radio, do not have TV. And this is a very beautiful thing. And many of them are within the education sector, are practicing teachers. I'd like to imagine a school leader is not just a head teacher or a principal. It is a person who takes leadership in whichever position they are and are able to deliver that. And so you'll see people who are actually being the stopgap measure between homes that do not have these facilities, printing documentation, repackaging these in a language that is more accessible to the learners. Because in our country, we have been told we have to maintain social distancing, so you cannot encourage communities to come together. And so you're finding individuals who are making telephone calls. In one of the programs I am in, we did a survey again to just understand, before talking about education, what are the situations in which our children are in. Quite a number, 60% of this, the female-headed households are on 1 meal a day. They're the poor of the poorest. So even before you talk about education, you must talk about the meals, and then see how you can reach with a gadget that will allow learners to reach. So I think my main message now is really to celebrate the agency we are seeing, and that there is potential in actually crowdsourcing and understanding these ideas because they are context relevant, so that we connect context relevant solutions to what we are seeing coming from national and international. And the solution is really with these leaders who have shown agency. Back to you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Sara. I think that's great. We are seeing more than ever school leaders, the role of school leaders being more of a community leader. And like you said just now, look, they are very creative in the solutions that they've come up with. Now to Dr. Iwan Syahril. Dr. Syahril has had quite a distinguished career as a teacher and a researcher in Indonesia and abroad. He was recently promoted to the Director General for Teaching and Education Personnel in the Ministry of Education and Culture. Dr. Iwan, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. I know that you are a key member in the Ministry of Education and Culture with a newly appointed minister, one that we Malaysians are very jealous of. And we know that he has a very ambitious education reform agenda, of which the focus on school leadership was a part of it. So how has this pandemic impacted how you think about making education reforms now, particularly those related to school leadership? Dr. Iwan? Oh.
Uh-oh. Dr. Iwan, can you hear my voice?
No.
I think he'll log back in.
He will. All right. Okay, so I'll be notified when he comes back, and then we'll get him on that question. But if I can just now go back to Minister Werner and just ask you.
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Iwan.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I can. Did you hear
Hello,
my
can you
question
hear me?
now? Yes, we can. Yes, I can.
Hi, Cheryl. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, I can. Did you hear my question just now, Dr. Iwan?
Okay. shall I just start? I cannot hear you though, but I know that you can hear me. All right.
Okay.
Thank you. In regards to Indonesia, at the moment we are undergoing an ambitious reform agenda in education called Merdeka Belajar, which in English maybe is translated to freedom to learn. Basically, we want to change the education ecosystem's culture from the culture of more onto compliance to the culture of innovation. And in this innovation, we want to encourage all the stakeholders to do a lot of experimentation of new ideas with a focus on helping students to learn better and emphasizing school as the unit of innovation. So the direction for the school leadership is to give a lot of autonomy to schools, also provide them with support, of course, and a transparency mechanism, but focusing again like how to help them to help students to learn better. So we really strongly advocate for the instructional leadership. We want to encourage like the teachers and then make them the teachers who understand about student learning to become like the leaders of learning in their school. These leaders should understand about like how students learn and then capable to be a coach or mentor for other teachers. So that was like the agenda of the reform. Like we just like started like last October, so it's still like new. And then COVID struck, and then of course like the first principle for us is health first. We want to make sure that the students and the teachers, the principals and the parents are safe and take care of their health. So we encourage them to or gave like the regulation for study from home, work from home. And then we provide the regulatory framework for this, and we coordinate with the local government to make sure this happens. And then the second step is we know that because Indonesia is so complex. We have a lot of students, 50 million students and more than 200,000 schools all across like thousands of islands. And then we need like a variety of approach to deal with this. So we want to make sure that some learning happens rather than no learning at all. So the first thing that we did was like collaborate with the education platform, technology and the telecommunication companies to make sure that they provide like options for students to learn and teachers and principals also to run teaching and learning as much as possible, of course, within the limited circumstances. And the second one, we know that not all students and principals and schools that have the internet connection. So then we launched like a massive like television program, national television, and then also with some other options like radio, and we also rely on teachers to collaborate. We have like a platform in our ministry for teachers to share lesson plans and ideas of how to deal with particular lessons at particular levels. So it's more like a crowdsource of platform for teachers to share ideas. And what we learned from our survey, that we know that principals have taken some actions in terms of making adjustment for teaching and learning. In our survey, actually, more than 90% of principals reported that they have made adjustment, meaning that they have moved towards, okay, what we can do to help students to learn better. They made adjustment with the school budget, so make sure that teachers can teach, students can learn, and also they provide like some guidelines for the teachers, encourage them to attend like webinars, collaborate with other teachers. But still, of course, it's not, again, like it's not ideal. Nobody plans for this situation. Nobody wants this to happen, right? So some, of course, like teachers are still struggling with like how to deal with like technology, teaching and learning, and so on and so forth. And even when they have technology, and of course the infrastructure is not there, so it's struggling for all of us. But the other part that we also learn is actually maybe after post-COVID, like the importance of like the support from the local government. And because like Indonesia is huge, and I think this partnership with the local government is very important. And during COVID, I think still a significant number of principals haven't got like the kind of like support from the government. So I think we, the central government and local government, needs to do a better job for this to support the principals to learn. But one thing that I feel particularly encouraged by to COVID is that we are pushed to learn to deal with the uncomfortable, to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I think this is a huge thing. We are conditioned with no options, and then we have to try something new. I think this is a good mental attitude going forward after post-COVID, because again, like 21st century industrial revolution 4.0, disruption is the new normal. To be comfortable with the uncomfortable is actually a huge thing. So I think we are learning to deal with this, and then reducing the anxiety with the use of technology. And we believe that technology is a tool that can democratize quality education for all students. And I think this is a lesson or something positive that we can carry out after COVID.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really like that, to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? When you're put in this situation, the school leaders now have no choice but to use technology to reach out to the students. So I think we want to ask a few questions based on what people sent in when they signed up for the registration form. So Minister Werner, if I could just ask you, how do you think governments are balancing the need to focus on the immediate crisis response while ensuring the longer-term goals of the systems are met? Minister Werner?
Okay, yes, I'm back on, yes. Thank you. I think it's important to realize that while in-class teaching or learning is suspended under this crisis, learning continues, right? And the people who make sure that that learning continues are school leaders. In the case of the government, the Minister of Education and his or her support team. So that means that support from the government ought to continue. There is no shifting of budgetary support to health because health has crisis, right? Education ought to take priority, and the minister who already has a sectoral plan, normally called education sector plan or strategy, ought to make sure that that plan is not derailed, that it continues, is not defunded, that it continues, that the minister also gains the confidence of his or her staff. And that means also supporting the teachers and the parents in whatever way he or she can to stay engaged. So government's role is very crucial in attending to the immediate crisis, but not losing focus that there is a long-term strategy and a long-term plan, that while in-class learning is suspended, learning ought to continue so that children remain engaged, parents remain engaged, and that the system remains intact. It's not broken. True.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think at the heart of this pandemic, education reform still has to continue. So Dr. Sara, if I can just ask you, what advice would you have for school systems, what advice would you have for governments on how they can effectively utilize school leaders during this time? Dr. Sara?
Yes, indeed. The school leader is definitely at the center of this all. When you look at some of the advice we are getting about rethinking, reopening schools, what needs to be done, there's a lot of information that is needed about schools that one needs to act on. School leaders are the link to their communities. They are the leaders in communities who, when they speak, communities listen to them. They will be the beacon of hope in the communities, even when the feelings of the disease are making people feel a lot despondent. So I have no doubt in my mind that the school leader is very important. And at the moment in Kenya, we have an COVID education response committee that was just mooted, and I'm in this committee. And it is a small committee, but the representatives of school leaders, like the Head Teachers Association, and this is the association of the principals, both primary and secondary, are members of this committee, because they will bring with them a lot of knowledge about their schools, some of it perhaps is written or not written. The unions are also very critical in this. So one cannot really discuss anything about education now, returning to school, what might be, how learners might be, the kind of messaging you want to go to learners or to parents without engaging with the school.
True. Thank you. Thank you so much. So I saw this one question and I thought it's very interesting. So I want to push this question to Dr. Praveen. So a lot of school leaders want to know if there's one thing that they need to do, just one solution, one thing that they need to really work on during this time of crisis, what would it be?
Great question. Very difficult question, but very important. The one thing that all school leaders must do is keep the interests of those children who are facing learning difficulty in all classrooms the core of the problem. If see, the children who are always above average and children who are very active learners, they can somehow manage learning in such kind of crisis times. But the children who are at risk, I think their interests must be in the core of the strategy for every school leader. When schools reopen, they must, if at all they reopen, if they reopen, then if we have to follow, anyway, we have to follow decongestion norm. In such case, the first children who should be brought to the institution are those children who are at risk. The children who have learning difficulty, children who are dying with hunger, and children who have no resources whatsoever, including the television and the mobile phones, those children must be brought first. So if you ask me, I think they should be the first priority of all school leaders and their parents. Yes.
Thank you so much. I think yes, so school leaders need to focus on the students who are the lost and the last, the least and the lonely, right? Yeah. So let's talk a bit about school reopening. Dr. Iwan, when schools eventually reopen, what do you think some of the key issues that school leaders will have to deal with? And what are some of the skills that they need to actually successfully reopen schools? You're on mute, Dr. Iwan. You're okay.
All right.
Yes.
Hear me now, right? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think we've been thinking about
Oh no, you're on mute again, Dr. Iwan. Sorry.
that safety first, right? I think in COVID, I think it's not just about the students, but also it's about the parents and the community, the grandparents' safety that we need to think about. And different regions in Indonesia have like different situations in regard of COVID. Some maybe are not really that affected, like Jakarta, but some maybe need like we need to be more cautious. I think. The school leaders, we need to trust them to come up with like what is best and relevant for their context. I think if there is one thing again like that we are really encouraged by the situation is we are conditioned to try experiment with new ideas, and the focus. I think again, I think what's beautiful about the situation now. The teachers, the principals, the parents, like the local government, and we are centered around like how to help the students to learn better. So it's like we are rallying around like a very important and the most important of all, which is about our students and how to serve the students to learn better. Like Dr. Kumar just mentioned, like the at-risk students will be like the most priority, and the students within like areas that are impacted or not really getting the access as much as like maybe in urban areas with the internet and technology, I think should be the priorities first to ensure they have like the kind of support to learn and to really like catch up as much as they can. I think that's very important. And also the power of collaboration. So again, like this is like for me, like to see like how like parents and you know the grandparents and principals and schools and the government try to like really, okay, what can we do to help better in this region, that region, and etc. It's like the collaboration is happening, and before perhaps like we are very busy with our routine and the rhythm, you know, and now everything is kind of like paused on hold, and everyone is, you know, like trying to support each other, the brothers helping the sisters, sisters helping the brothers, right? And of course it's not easy because the learning study from home, home is not really situated as like an ideal learning environment. So of course it's like a struggle. Appreciation for schools, for teachers too, right? It's happening too at the moment, like how teachers can really create that kind of learning environment. So collaboration, I think, is another key important thing when we open the school, and the school principals need to capitalize this momentum going forward.
True. I think, yeah, collaboration, especially with parents. I know in Malaysia, our school leaders, they often worry about getting parent support. So I think now that they have them on board, they should just really make use of this.
Exactly.
So let's talk a bit about the future of education. So in some countries, we are seeing examinations being cancelled, and we're asking ourselves, is this the beginning of the end of formal examinations? So if I can just bring back Minister Werner, just to ask you, how do you think school curriculum will change because of this? And now that curriculum is changing, what do you think, how must school leaderships change as well?
So I think Dr. Iwan said something, but before I go on to the future, let me just briefly say something about how important it is, the previous question you asked. There are at least 4 things to keep in mind as a school leader. Dr. Iwan and others have already spoken about the need, in order to reopen schools safely, the need to re-emphasize communications, especially collaborative communications that comes even from the Prime Minister or the President. The idea is you want to reinstill or reinforce confidence across the sector. So communications important. The other thing that I mentioned for reopening is we are going through traumatic events, right? Teachers are not equipped to deal with what students have gone through. So in your professional development before you reopen, initiate a course on psychosocial support to give teachers new skills on how to support parents and students in the post-COVID period, or if we will ever have a post-COVID period. The third thing is to symbolically or not symbolically also disinfect the school environment and make sure that the hygiene is as carefully planned and executed as possible, including bathrooms, girls' bathrooms. You know, make sure that you disinfect. And the last thing that we often don't consider is to take a look at the education management information system. When your students would have returned, there will be a need to count the number of students coming back to look at school infrastructure. So school census may be a very good, important information to give you control back of your sector or your school. Know who is there, know the gender, know issues about disability, and try to remove all obstacles there may be to access. Now, about the future, this is not going to be business as usual. Everybody has noted that. It's going to be a new opportunity for technology. And in this case, I believe we will be learning from health. I am joining forces with others to look at the concept I call last mile teachers in an emergency. If we train teachers for in-class teaching during normal times, but we don't train teachers to respond to Ebola or to COVID-19. What's the place of the teacher in a crisis like this? We need to think about that in the future. We need to think about the cost that social distancing will mean for poor countries. If ever we should have an incident, please God, of an outbreak in the school system, it will place pressure on poor countries, especially where resources are already tight, to do more, to create more space between students in the classroom. And more importantly, technology will play a different role, right? In health, we've talked about contact tracing a lot. What if we reimagine the teacher and the student during crisis to use the similar technology to measure learning outcomes while accounting for teachers and students wherever they may be during the crisis? So things are going to change, and I can't wait to see what innovations will emerge to become common practice or best practice and then common practice in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Minister. I think definitely all this while we've been training our teachers for the traditional classroom, and now it's really time for us to really relook at this whole training and how they deal with the pandemic. Dr. Sara, if I can just get your thoughts around this same topic of the future of education. How will the curriculum change, and what does this mean for school leaderships?
Thank you about that. In Kenya, allow me to respond in that context. In a sense, we had already started on a rather futuristic education reform process with our competency-based curriculum. And what we are seeing at the moment is that it is giving energy to some of the pillars that were in the curriculum that had not found voice. So these are some of the positive things that are starting. For example, one of the pillars in the new curriculum is the parental engagement and empowerment, and the role and value-based education. And these are things that really you do not teach. Children need to see them, to catch them, to grow in them. And the home is the first place. So rather than all gloom, then this is about using this as the opportunity to reassess ourselves and the role each has to play in a wholesome education. And I think this is then beginning to allow people to reimagine, and what everyone used to say, I do not have time. Maybe the time was there, it needed to be created because the learning of your child matters. And so these are some of the positive things. It is also affirming some of the issues that we had, which perhaps we were not giving a very big attention to. So like, for example, while digital literacy is a key competence we have identified for our learners, perhaps COVID has shown that we did not do enough. We could have done much more, but we did not. And this is an opportunity to prioritize what is important. It has confirmed that our education system is not as resilient as it ought to be, and that it is the shocks, especially on those farthest behind, are a little bit more. So I think it is this particular situation, the pandemic, is allowing us to reflect on what we need to do that will make our education serve everybody. I think it is also a good opportunity if we are brave enough to do some of the things we wanted to do and we were not able to do. So it can give us a good opportunity to start. For example, in Kenya, there's been a long-standing discussion about aligning the school calendar with the budget schedule. And this would have meant, instead of starting the year in January, you begin it in September. This could be a good opportunity if we are brave enough, because it has a lot of implications. So the reimagining is not too far off. It is actually very near, because we have been going through a system of 50 years of independence where we are trying to make an education that matters. And I think I see the road becoming clearer for us.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sara. So you mentioned something interesting about our education system not being resilient enough to cope with a pandemic or crisis like this. Dr. Praveen, in your opinion, what can we do then to ensure that our education system is resilient to cope with these changes?
I think we should be ever ready, and the leaders should be properly trained to meet such unforeseen situations. I have a couple of things in my mind. One is we must identify the primary stakeholders. I've been telling in the entire conversation again and again that the community is one of the most important stakeholders. The impact of any teacher, any school on the student perhaps is only 45 to 50%. The remaining 50% is by the community, because student is going to spend a lot of time in the community. So you are asking about how do we reimagine the education after COVID or during COVID in the future. So one of the important things is we have to encourage and then train the community to share at least a part of this responsibility of upbringing of the child. Unfortunately, communities and many parents have outsourced this conveniently to the schools and the teachers, and they're forgetting their responsibility. Today, I got a call from the parent that, sir, I don't want to give my mobile phone, my smartphone to my child because I have a lot of other things to do. Then we told them, look, now this is an extraordinary time. If you don't share your mobile phone if your smartphone with your children, then how are they going to learn? And then they are conveniently saying, oh, look, there are so many notifications, there are so many distractions, there are so many dangerous sites in the mobile phone. So I'm not sure whether my child is going to go through only educational content or non-educational content. These are some of the concerns, but we need to train the communities in a very proactive manner and a very intensive manner to handle this learning at their homes. So then second thing, what we have done, Syahril, for the last 2 years, we have been training parents about the responsible parenting, particularly sharing the burden of teachers in terms of monitoring the learning. So it is not the responsibility of the teacher, but it is the responsibility of parent as well. So we have been training, and then we will continue post-COVID times. We'll continue to do this in a much more intensive manner. We'll try to cover a lot of communities to do this. Then another last thing what I wanted to tell you, the traditional way of handling the syllabus. A traditional way of curating the content and then the delivering the content has to undergo a radical change. We must identify what are the basic minimum competencies which are required to be learned by the children at the appropriate age. So, and then those things have to be reimagined and then repackaged and then have to be given to the students in a much attractive way. If we don't do this and then we stick to the same syllabus, and then we are going to have limited days, like Minister Werner has been talking about decongestion of the schools. So when you, instead of 640 students, I am going to call only 280 or 300 students, 320 students. In 320 students stay with me for 100 days, another 300 are going to stay with me for another 100 days. So my 220 days academic, the days of schooling have suddenly come down to 110 days or 120 days. In such case, what are the most critical things which I am going to teach to the child? And what are the things which the child's parents and the child himself or herself has to manage on own? Maybe we may have to divide the entire syllabus into, the low-hanging fruits and high-hanging fruits. High-hanging fruits will be dealt by the teachers, and then low-hanging fruits can be dealt by the students on their own. The last thing, the students can be encouraged to do as many projects as possible. And what we have discovered in the last 5 years in Telangana is teaching happened to be the best way of learning. Can we encourage a lot of students to teach their own colleagues? Maybe somebody was talking about collaborative learning. Can we have collaborative learning? Can we have quartets? Can we have groups of 6? Can we have groups of 4? Wherein the children can teach themselves, so that in such crisis times, teachers being the facilitators, and then children can do learning on their own, and teachers can monitor the learning, and teachers can bring a lot of variety and then research into the classroom is something which the flipped classroom is another thing which we have been talking about. Everywhere we talk about flipped classroom, but we have not been able to implement flipped class. But today, this is the time where we must grab the advantage of this COVID, and then we must bring flipped class with a lot of conviction back to the classrooms, and then do it. Is something which I thought I should future. This should be the future. Technology is always there, but but how do we utilize technology properly? At least now we must reimagine how we teach a lot of things to the children. Yeah, thank you.
That's true. Yeah, I think that reimagining education systems is something that we've been talking about so much. So now is really a good time for us to do it. So coming from the government perspective, Dr. Iwan, are government systems thinking around the idea of build back better and the opportunity to reimagine education, like Dr. Praveen said just now, or at the very least, improve inclusion? You're on mute, Dr. Iwan. Sorry, Dr. Iwan, you're on mute. Okay,
Yeah. Okay. Um, of course, definitely, like reimagining education and to make sure like no child left behind. Like that's the tagline, right? Um, Here's the thing. Before, I think we are also engaged in this kind of effort to reimagine education and etc. That it is possible to innovate. It is possible to trust our school leaders, our teachers to innovate. And innovation, of course, is not like abracadabra and everything is beautiful all at once. It takes process, but the struggle or the process to be there is just part of the journey. So I think it is possible for us to have like a culture of innovation and to have the school leaders have the chief innovation officers in all the schools all across the nation. I think the trust is there because we have seen, of course, it's not ideal, but we've seen like very encouraging signs that it is possible. And the second one, I think what COVID also has given us the trust is it is possible for having like a personalized learning, like a focus on the students, because each region, each context is dealing with this differently. And actually, it's okay. I think we've been talking about student-centered learning for ages, but then maybe the like just the trust that it's okay to be there, it's okay to learn was not there. But now COVID has given us that, it's okay, like to do something that just focusing on your students. You don't have to there's a saying, right? I was a teacher too, so and then there is this I don't teach English, I teach students, right? So it's like the philosophy of you just don't just teach the curriculum, but you just look at your students and you start there. So you don't start from the curriculum. Curriculum can be adjusted, but look at the students first and then start from there. And it is possible with this. And then the technology part, I think all the other speakers already mentioned about this. With our, we are conditioned to have the anxiety reduced perhaps significantly, and it's okay to use the technology and now to use it for various purposes. And we believe that technology can make education, quality education, not only reachable for many more students, but also will become more efficient and effective. So this is like the way to get it education better, faster, and cheaper. I think that's like the challenge that they're facing now with limited budget. But above all, Syahril, I want to emphasize this. What COVID has given us, and this, I think, we will never be the same kind of generation before. I think this is like a new generation post-COVID, is to strengthen our humanity. I think we believe like the power of COVID like teaches us to.
Oh no, Dr. Iwan, I think you've muted yourself again.
Sorry.
Okay, yes, okay, sorry.
So COVID has taught us to strengthen our humanity. That what is more, we need to have the empathy for each other, to care for each other, and we are mortal. Our time is short, so to love is very important. To love others, to make sure that you have time for the one that you love, and also the power of collaboration for common cause. I mean, not only as a nation, but also a global citizen. Like we're fighting COVID really now as a human race. This is like a fight between human race and right? So, and how we're facing it, we are collaborating across borders. So I think we are taking care of our global village together. And I think this is something, a very powerful lesson of COVID that I think we will be reminded again and again, and will be, I think, incorporated to the curriculum. Either it's the explicit curriculum or the hidden curriculum, because I think this is something that for us to reflect from all of this, the values, I think are more important than the what. And I think this is our human values, I think, are at the core of everything, above the technology and etc.
True. Thank you so much, Dr. Iwan. So we're gonna look at a few questions that people have asked in the chat. And I think just now, Dr. Iwan, you spoke about like teachers now finally being able to teach students to love learning, like you said just now, not just teaching English, but just teaching them to love learning. And I think very close to that is this question that at the back of our heads, while we're all saying, okay, we're going to focus on learning, we're going to focus on the love of learning. I think this question is very timely on how do we actually assess student learning, and how do we grapple with the global standardized testing now that this pandemic has changed everything. If I could ask Dr. Sara on this. Dr. Sara?
Yes.
Yes.
My apologies. Internet was fluctuating here. So standardized testing. Obviously, yes. I know we are all in this group really anti high stakes assessments. But yet, in the work I do at the People's Action for Learning Network, we come from where we do citizen-led assessments of basic literacy and numeracy. So the belief I have is that it is very important to have a system of judging whether we are just taking advantage of children's time and that they are able to learn something. And so if we have an assessment that is able to gauge whether children are learning, I think we need to go for it. And sometimes, while classroom-based assessments are the most important, because then there is a way in which you communicate with the child, they are diagnostic, they help. I have also found value in having something that will allow you as a nation to be able to tell if the system of education is working for all. So I see the role of these assessments, therefore, not being one of ranking that I am better than you, but one that gives us enough information that will allow us to be true to the commitment that we make to every child, that they are truly coming to get an education of quality. And if we do not put in certain levels of assessments and checks, then we will go in this pathway where we believe we are doing good, but we are not checking ourselves. So if we are able to do certain assessments, whether they're standardized or not, that will give us information, will give us knowledge, that will point us to the deficiencies we have, that will even have a connection with resourcing, so that those who are not doing well or where they ought to be are not punished for it.
Hello, Dr. Sara? Hello? Sorry, Samir, is Dr. Sara on?
I think her connection is just cut out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think we'll just... Okay. Let me just move on to the next question quickly. I hope she comes back and continues what she's saying. But we'll take this one question from the floor. So asking to all the speakers, how do you predict the growth of the public-private partnership in education sector as a response to address the COVID-19 and or post-COVID-19? Dr. Iwan, if I could ask you this again, like how do you predict the growth of the public-private partnership in education sector?
Of course, I think government cannot solve all the problems, that is for sure. I think our philosophy in Indonesia now, in the Ministry of Education and Culture, is the government is the enabler of the stakeholders to work together for the common cause. And we define the common cause is our student learning.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So what we can see from COVID now is that we cannot fight this alone. Like, it's not about the government. It's about everyone is chipping together and for a common cause, common purpose. This is what we believe. I think going forward, it's already something that we believe before, and I think going forward, I think it's going even stronger. The public-private partnership. Again, like what we need to, for in terms of the partnership, we need to be clear about the common purpose. And the common purpose here is the education of our future generation, which will be leaders of this country in the future. So if we believe for that, and then we will work together on that. And I think COVID, just like COVID, like we're fighting for how to find the vaccine for this now. I think we will do the same thing, I think, in education in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Iwan. Minister Werner, so there are lots of people from the non-profit sector here on this call today, lots of people from NGOs. How do you think NGOs can become a valued partner at this time?
So NGOs are already partners, so to speak. I mean, in many countries, if not all, we have local education groups, and that is comprised of government and all of the stakeholders, including donors and implementers in the sector. So in every instance, the driving force is partnering with government to implement the government strategy. Sometimes that's not the case, right? But more and more, there's a recognition that, as the previous speaker said, government provides an enabling environment, and then partners work with government to achieve the common good. And once you define the partnership, you should be monitor it from time to time. So government should welcome partners, because as has already been stated, governments cannot do it alone. In the context of growing populations where resources are getting scarce, we need to look for blended funding and partnerships to be able to achieve the common good. And so I believe that it's in the interest of government to be able to partner with the private sector to educate its workforce for the present and for the future.
Thank you so much, Mr. Werner. Dr. Praveen, if I can ask you back again. Are you here?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah.
Yes, okay. So in your opinion, so lots of people, so same question, lots of people from the NGOs are here on this call. How can we be a valued partner at this time?
I think NGOs have a lot of role to play. I think even with best of the resources, the school leaders and the school administrations cannot reach out to all the students during this crisis time, and even after the crisis as well. See, there is a problem of food to the poorest of the poor people, and there are so many children who are without homes. Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions, due to red zoning and then orange zoning, we are not able to keep all the students in the schools and hostels. So NGOs can always reach out to those families who do not have proper shelter and then the food. And there are so many kids out there who do not have smartphones and then who do not have books. So NGOs can always supply the books to those kids, and then books and the worksheets and whatnot. And NGOs can also start micro schools to bridge the gap. Like we have been talking for the last 1 hour, how do we bridge the inequality, reduce the gap between the learning gap, learning inequality. So NGOs can always pitch in during this time, particularly during this time, because this COVID crisis has exposed the gap between the width of the gap between the haves and have-nots, haves with digital technology and have-nots without any access to the technology. So that is where NGOs can play a major role, and then NGOs can also train the parents about responsible parenting, and then they have been doing this job, and then NGOs can also help the schools to build up their resources and then to make their health systems stronger, so on and so forth. And the last one, you have also talked about public-private partnership. I'll be very cautiously optimistic on public-private partnership. So public-private partnership must not turn into a kind of ethic, surge into the schools. We have to be very cautious when we invite a technology into schools. The technology should only be used as a communication tool. But I'm a firm believer that no technology so far has been invented to replace a teacher in the classroom. A teacher is a teacher. Teacher is not only a teacher. Teacher is a mentor. Teacher is a philosopher, and teacher is a parent above everything else. So technology, we should not innocently believe that the technology is going to replace the schools, and that's why we must have a public-private partnership, and then private operators can bring a lot of technology and then sell to the schools. No. So technology can be a very good communication tool, and then technology can be a very good enabler, but technology as such cannot create a content and then cannot do the upbringing of the child. So that we should be extremely clear. But at the same time, they can bring a lot of good practices. They can bring a lot of innovations into the classroom, into the school administration, into the better monitoring systems, into better healthcare systems. These are the areas where technology and public-private partnership can always, play a major role. This is what I think, Syahril.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Praveen. So I think we've heard so many interesting ideas today, a lot on collaboration, communication. I know Minister Werner said many times on when school reopens, we have to disinfect the school environment. He also talked about the education management system. We also talked a bit about student assessment and what it will look like. And lastly, we ended with a public-private partnership. So thank you so much for this wonderful discussion, and thank you so much to all our panelists. We have 1 minute left, so I'll pass it back to Samir, who I think wants to say a few things.
Yes, no, thank you, Syahril, for hosting this conversation. I know I've left with a lot of ideas that I'm looking forward to thinking about more. And again, thank you to the panelists, Minister Werner, Dr. Sara, Dr. Iwan, Dr. Praveen. I think it's been a really enriching conversation. And to all who have joined, thank you for joining and taking a time out of your day to be with us. We will be sharing this recording with you all via email. So you can also pass to your colleagues that weren't able to make it. And we also will be passing on some contact information for each of our partner organizations in case you want to connect with them to think about how to take this work further. So thank you all again for joining, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.